Hello and welcome back to the Today's Soapbox podcast. Today I am recording a companion podcast to my article that dropped called Anyone Can Be Barbie. The article focuses on the release of the Barbie that was created in collaboration with the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network. So this doll represents just women with autism and provides representation for the autistic community within the Barbie world. So before we get started, I just want to mention that article is available on the website. You can find the website at todays-soapbox.com. That is TODAYS-SOAPBOX.com. So you can find that and more articles, some of which I will mention in this podcast, there. I also want to shout out, it is Women's History Month. I think that's a great time to be talking about Barbie. Barbie is not the pinnacle of women's history. There have been a lot of really cool women throughout all of time who have been a huge part of history. And Barbie is just a small portion of that. So, yeah, I just found that to be really exciting. It's also a relevant product for the disability community. If you are not a part of the disability community, I think it's important to recognize that that is a marginalized group that you can join at any time. There are people who experience disability for a limited time, such as if you're injured, you may have to take advantage of accessible parking, for example, or accessible transportation. You may have to use mobility aids. There are people who go through brief periods of illness that affect their mind or body or whatever it may be. So if you are not a part of the disability community, don't count yourself out yet, because, as we age, if you're privileged enough to get to age, there are effects that come with that you could become involved with the disability community. So it's important to be advocating and involved at any point, because you never know what your life will look like, what others' life will look like, or what it currently looks like. There's a lot of hidden disabilities, and we'll talk a little bit about that in this episode. I also want to disclose I did purchase this Barbie. I was not gifted it. Next time, Mattel is welcome to gift me anything. Reach out to me. I will take anything you'll give me. I'll review it. I'll review it kindly. So I did purchase it, but just want to disclose it was not gifted to me. I don't have that kind of clout yet. So if you guys want to help me get there, you can comment, share, follow this podcast on whichever platform you're on, whether that's Spotify. I believe I'm on Amazon Music, Pocket Casts, and maybe another one. I don't know. You can check the website. I also have a social media presence on several different platforms. You can engage with that, or you can subscribe on the website. It's a very direct way to support me by just for free. You will get a notification in your email about new articles that come out. So without further ado, let's talk about this Barbie. So this Barbie, I call her Autism Barbie. I know that that's not the name they gave her, but I don't have a problem with autism. I think there's nothing wrong with that. Some people prefer identity first. Some people prefer person first language. But just know I made that decision thoughtfully. But you can name her whatever you want. You can describe her however you want. Hopefully you'll do it nicely, but yeah. So this Barbie was announced by the Barbie brand on January 12th, 2026. And she is a part of the Barbie Fashionistas line. And this doll was designed in collaboration with the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, or ASAN. I call it ASAN. There's probably a different way people verbalize the acronym, but oh well. So the doll was created specifically for just any community, but with autistic children and adults in mind. So there are accessories featured and different physical aspects of the doll that are for a representation of autism, and it was done thoughtfully in collaboration with autistic people. Some brands choose to partner with Autism Speaks to discuss autism. That is a controversial organization in the autism community. So I really am happy that Mattel partnered with ASAN because it is more based on autistic people being able to speak for themselves and centering what they have to say instead of what, like somebody with an autistic friend or an autistic child or whatever. Like there are plenty of autistic people who are wanting to use their voice and are already using their voice, and it's just time we listen to those voices. So the doll's accessories include a fidget spinner, a pair of headphones, and an augmentative and alternative communication device, or AAC device. So these are just small physical ways to represent ways an autistic person may meet their needs. So this fidget spinner is actually so cool. It actually spins. I don't know if the microphone will pick it up, but I don't know if you can hear it. It's actually spinning, and it actually stays on her thumb really well. I have had many an accessory fall off a Barbie in my day. This one's pretty well designed to stay on. She also has a pair of headphones. They're really cool because on the inside they look like they have padding and like a speaker. Obviously it's just molded plastic. There's texture to it. I don't know if you can hear me scratching it. I bet you weren't expecting Autism Barbie ASMR in this podcast, but you're getting it, so please subscribe. The AAC device is cool. It's like, some people are calling it an iPad. It's not an iPad. An AAC device is like a tablet with different buttons representing different things. So there's like a button for and, a button for home, a button for the, a button for feelings, a button for greeting. And so a person using one can like click on it and show somebody, or some of them like read out what they're clicking on. So it helps somebody who is either nonverbal or less verbal or not interested in communicating verbally for any number of reasons. Like there's no shame in that, but they still want to communicate, and an AAC device can help with that. So I thought that was really cool to include. It doesn't stay on as well as the fidget spinner, so my Barbie does not hold it very often, just because it's not something I have experience with, and I have a harder time getting it on. But that is just me. I'm probably doing it wrong. There is also like some different physical designs for this Barbie. So most of the fashionista line has what's called 5 points of articulation. That's the shoulder, the hip, and the neck. So 1 neck, 2 shoulders, 2 hips, that's 5 points. A more complicated doll, like for example, an American Girl doll has 5 points of articulation. A more complicated doll may have like elbows, wrists, knees, ankles, sometimes a rib cage that moves. So like the Barbie Made to Move line has that. So this doll was actually generously granted 4 additional points of articulation, 2 elbows and 2 wrists. Barbies, I feel like I remember they used to have more points of articulation, but the Barbie Fashionista line retails for about $10, so it's a decently accessible price point as far as fashion dolls go. You just kind of get what you're paying for, which is just less articulation. But because this doll could potentially want to stim, they have provided her with additional articulation. So stimming, if you're not aware, it's just kind of short for self-stimulatory behavior. That's usually repetitive actions or movements, or sometimes people have vocal stims. You may have noticed somebody who like flaps their hands, for example, or likes to snap their fingers, or like touch their chin. There's a bazillion ways to stim. And a fidget spinner is one of those. So theoretically, this Barbie could spin her fidget spinner. I'll see if I can get her to do it. I don't know if you could hear that, but I struggled. That's just because I don't know how to do this. But, oh, okay, now I got the hang of it. Yeah, so this Barbie has the ability to stim, and that I think is a really cool innovation. There are lots of different disability accommodations, such as mobility aids, that would be helpful to have additional points of articulation. For example, a lot of the Barbies that use wheelchairs have knees, so they can bend their knees and sit functionally in the wheelchair, as opposed to having legs straight out. So I think it's cool that they took that into consideration. There is also a difference to her eyes. A lot of fashionistas, their eyes face directly forward, like they're looking at you. And a lot of autistic people do not prefer to make eye contact. So this doll's eyes are slightly, like her gaze is slightly off to the side, which is, pretty standard in neurotypical people even. So I think it's cool to just have a variety of options for how a doll, I mean, obviously it's a doll. It's like that video of the kid with the Elsa doll, and she goes, hers isn't real, her is a doll. I'm trying to keep that in mind, that like this doll is not a person, but at the same time, I feel a lot of empathy for her, and I'm so glad she doesn't have to look straight at me. Again, I'm aware she's plastic. However, I want her to be comfortable. Her clothes are also intended to be like loose fitting and comfortable. She's got like a tunic length dress with like a peplum ruffle situation at the bottom. It's decently stretchy and it's purple with white vertical stripes. Now, I've met a lot of people with favorite colors, and usually if someone's favorite color is like red, they don't care and they don't tell you. Or like green, they don't care, they don't tell you. Blue, they don't care, they don't tell you. People like myself, whose favorite color is purple, we want you to know. My phone case is purple. My skincare is all purple. I choose like brands I use based on whether or not they have purple packaging. I'm an alumni of UW. Their main color is purple, and I'm not going to pretend for a second that that wasn't a factor in my decision. So I think it was cool because there's a lot of people who love purple, and I think if she likes purple, that is wonderful, and that is, I just think, good representation for the purple community. And I'll talk about the purple, actually, no, I'll talk about the purple right now. There is a child on social media, a parent who posts their child on social media, and their child is autistic and loves the color purple. And so a lot of people have speculated that the decision to clothe the doll in purple could be based on her preference. And when they sent this doll to a variety of creators, they sent it with some purple accessories. There was like a weighted blanket, a human-size weighted blanket, and a human-size set of loop earplugs. Just different sensory items. In my opinion, a very thoughtfully crafted gift box for primarily autistic creators. And a lot of the stuff was purple to kind of match the Barbie. Those videos are available on social media. I think they're really cool to watch because people get so excited to see themselves represented in a way that feels like somebody thought about it, which is really, really nice. It's the bare minimum, but it's really nice. So I thought that was really cool. It is also meant to be more accessible clothing for somebody with potentially less developed motor skills, for example, to be able to take the dress on and off. Like, she's got like Velcro, and it goes from like the back of her neck to like mid waist. She's got like a thing on the back that says Genuine Barbie 2015 Mattel, because they're using the like standard body mold from 2015. I did not know Barbies had like a Genuine Barbie notice on the back. That's kind of funny. Gotta make sure you don't get a counterfeit Barbie. So she also has like these little purple shoes. I don't like them, but that's because I don't wear flats. They also gave her flat feet for stability. Some autistic creators brought up that like they toe walk. Walk on their toes, essentially is what that means. And they would have preferred a Barbie that had like the high heel feet. I don't like the high heel feet because I don't wear shoes when I'm at home, so I'm more of the flat foot Barbie in my opinion. So I like that she has a flat feet. Plus, I had another Barbie that had a pair of like white high top sneakers. So I switched those out because I like those shoes better. So my Barbie is wearing high top sneakers instead of the flats. But they are cute flats. They seem flexible and easy to get on and off, which is wonderful. So, with representing autism, there was some controversy, and there usually is for a lot of inclusivity efforts because it's really hard to include an entire community by releasing one doll. So every autistic person is different. They all have unique needs, preferences, and appearances, just like everybody else. So it's important to note no singular doll will or can represent every autistic person. Now, the decision with this doll, she is a woman of color, which is not a typical depiction of autism. Usually when we see autism depicted in the media, it's like a white man or white boy who likes trains. But there's actually a lot of autistic people who are not white or not male. And so choosing to represent autism with a woman of color shows kind of a step forward in understanding what autism could look like. There were a lot of people who were like, oh, but this doll doesn't look like me. And so they wanted the accessories like the headphones, AAC device, and fidget spinner to be a fashion pack instead. So you could just buy it to add to a Barbie you already have that maybe looks more like you. While that's an interesting idea, oftentimes the fashion pack retails for about the same amount of money as like the actual doll. So I don't mind the doll. I think she's pretty, and I like the articulated arms, and I just like her face. I like her eyes. I just think she's very pretty, and I don't really have a problem with her not looking like me. Like that's not usually my first priority in dolls, and part of that is because I'm a privileged individual who has had plenty of dolls who look like me, whereas there's a lot of people who are not as able to readily find a doll that looks like them. So giving more kids an opportunity to see themselves in a doll, I think, is wonderful. So, yeah, this is just the first autistic Barbie. Who knows? If this Barbie sells well, there could be more autistic Barbies. We could see autistic Ken dolls. We could see, autistic plus-size Barbies that are any number of ethnicities or any number of body types. We could have a petite autistic Barbie. They just chose standard body mold and then a woman of color. So, I can see why some people would be like, but that's not me. But I think it's actually a really big step forward. So, like I said before, autism representation in media and pop culture usually emphasizes men, and autistic women tend to be underrepresented. There's a lot of characters that are autism coded and they're not canonized as autistic, and even those characters are often male. So boys are more frequently diagnosed with autism than girls. However, new studies have been conducted, and by adulthood, women and men are equally as likely to be diagnosed. So this has led to a misconception that more, males have autism than females. So there's disproportionate representation. So it's like, why would we represent autistic women if there's so few of them? But there's not. And so this gap in representation and understanding, it affects the way autistic people are understood by their peers. So the reason this disparity exists is because a lot of autistic women are not diagnosed until late teens, early 20s. That's often something they find for themselves, especially lower support needs autistic people. They find out, they're like, I'm struggling, or I'm noticing traits, or whatever may happen that's a catalyst for them, and they go, I think I might be autistic. And then they pursue a diagnosis, which is a helpful way, but a lot of people that are men or are higher support needs and their autism is potentially more visible to somebody on the outside or noticeable, and they are less able to mask, for example. Masking is like, it's what it sounds like. It's kind of like pretending you don't have autism. So a lot of people do that unconsciously, specifically women, so they are not noticed by teachers or professionals who interact with them. Like, that's not identified in them. So they are not diagnosed as children, even though they were autistic as children. Autism is not something you acquire. It's not, I mean, I've talked about this before, it's not vaccine related. There's still, research going on about how it works, but a lot of it has a genetic link. It's inherited biologically. So it's something you're born with. And just because it's not identified until adulthood doesn't mean it didn't exist in childhood. So there are as many autistic girls as there are autistic boys. It's just the boys are more likely to be diagnosed. So hopefully we'll see this gap close. The research continually changes and the way it's implemented changes. Recently, like I want to say last 20 years, the diagnosis of Asperger's was moved to be under the category of autism spectrum disorder, or ASD. So something that was previously understood to be a whole different thing is actually now understood to be part of a larger picture of autism. So there are people who are kind of transitioning from an understanding of their autism as Asperger's to just ASD. So that is a factor as well. There are people who were not recognized as autistic because they fit more the stereotype for Asperger's. So all that to say, showing diverse support needs and expressions of autism normalizes them and contributes to people feeling included. If you've never seen autism represented, it can be really scary. It shouldn't be, but it can be scary to meet somebody who is autistic for the first time because it's all new, and new things can be scary. It's understandable, but at the same time, if we expose children to these things earlier, they won't, arrive at school and be like, what's wrong with them? They'll be like, oh, they just have autism, and that's fine. Or they may just be like, they're different from me, and that's fine. It's the same way with, any other group. If you see diverse representations of skin color, for example, on TV, then when you meet real people, you're like, yep, we're all cool. Like, this is great. This is not new. This is awesome. So, yeah. So the promotion of the release of this doll was done in collaboration with autistic creators. They also found a couple who have like a particular interest in dolls, which I thought was a super cool way to promote this doll. So they chose 3 creators to be focused in like this campaign for the doll. And so I'm going to quickly tell you who each of them were. One of these creators was Madison Marilla. She is known for being a cast member on the show Love on the Spectrum on Netflix, and that's the US version of the show. She is an autism advocate from Plant City, Florida, and she owns a handcrafted jewelry business called Madizen. She is a big fan of dolls, and you can see that in the video. She's in a room full of dolls, and she is super excited to add an autistic Barbie to her collection that can kind of be a more intentional representation of her. And then there's Arushi Pratap, and she is a fashion designer and artist based in Tampa, Florida. and she uses her creative voice to reflect the way she experiences the world as an autistic woman of color. So she works in like fashion and textiles and clothing, and so she's a great person, since that was a aspect of the doll that was like heavily considered in the development. I think it was cool to include a fashion designer. Then also they included a young girl with autism from Las Vegas, Nevada, named Miko. She appears in autism awareness and advocacy content on social media with her mother Precious, and their channel is called The Gentle Life. So I just want a quick PSA. Children cannot give informed consent to appear in social media content, especially at Miko's age. So if you are curious to learn more about that topic, I have a piece called Protecting Private Childhoods. Is also recorded for season 1 of this podcast, if you would like to listen to it. So I encourage you to help protect children from social media exploitation. Even content about autism in children can lean towards exploitation by making money off of videos of potential meltdowns or difficulties they experience. And so I think it was great to include Miko. However, I do question the content made for that channel in general. And this isn't to target Precious and Miko. There are other people who make content about autism that features their children. And while it complicates the discussion of like nothing about us without us, there are autistic adults who can consent to being on social media, like Madison, for example. And many cast members from Love on the Spectrum make content about autism, and they can fully understand social media and talk about these issues from their personal experience while understanding the lack of privacy they may experience afterwards. So just something to consider. So all 3 creators, Madison, Arushi, and Miko, use their platforms for advocacy. So they're not they're not just like other influencers who happen to have autism. That's a central focus of their content, which I thought was interesting because they're all people who would be comfortable disclosing their diagnosis and their experience. So I think that was a thoughtful choice instead of forcing people to speak about something they maybe aren't comfortable speaking about, even though it's part of their identity. So female autism experiences are often neglected in media representations, like I've said. So I think it was great that they included women in this promotion. And then also, Miko and Arushi are women of color, which is an even more underrepresented group of the autism community. So I thought, since the doll is a woman of color, it was really cool to include Miko and Arushi so intentionally, because the doll may have a different impact for them as a part of a more niche community. So then I also want to talk about representation through dolls. So it's hard for white people specifically to understand how important it is to have a doll that looks like you, because we have grown up with like plenty of white Barbies. So it's not like, wow, this doll looks like me. It's like, oh, every doll looks like me. So it's more stands out when a doll doesn't look like you. So I encourage you to watch the documentary on Netflix, Black Barbie. There was a group of Black women over the years who worked with Mattel to develop the first Black Barbie characters and dolls. So the way Barbie works, I mean, you kind of get this from the Barbie movie, is there are some dolls that are Barbie, and there are some dolls that are her friends and family. So there's Barbie, and then there's, like, for example, she has sisters. Depending on the time you're playing with Barbie, her sisters could be any number of people. They could be Stacy, Skipper, Chelsea, Kelly. I think there was a baby. I want to say her name was like Carrie or something like that. I watched a video about it recently. It's crazy how many family members Barbie's had. There's also Ken. There's Alan. And then there's friends like Raquel and Teresa and Midge. So there's a wide variety of Barbie characters. But for the most part, like the Barbie Fashionistas line, they're either Barbie or they're Ken. And they're was a push when the first Black Barbie was created for her to be like a separate character. And then after a while, they created a Barbie that's just like a Barbie who is Black. Like, she is Barbie. Barbie as an identity. And now there's like this line they have where they have Malibu Barbie and Brooklyn Barbie. And Malibu Barbie is the traditional blonde Barbie. And then Brooklyn Barbie is a Black woman. And they're both Barbie. They're both Barbie Roberts. And so I think there's like a whole movie about it. I haven't watched it. I'm more of a like Barbie Nutcracker, Barbie Seven Dancing Princesses era, and Princess and the Pauper. So I'm more in line with that era. So I haven't watched the newer Barbie content, but there is an effort to make this Barbie Barbie. So when they created Black Barbie, they did so with Black employees there, and specifically Black women who could thoughtfully talk about hair and fashion and ensuring that the skin tone was accurate. A lot of people, when creating dolls of color or makeup for people of color, they darken things with black or gray pigments, whereas like it's melanin is not like black. It's kind of like a more, there's brown and red and yellow and little bits of blue. Like, to create these colors, you need a little bit more than just putting black in it. So Black people can help in developing these products to ensure that they're not like ashy in color. So I thought it was really cool. That documentary kind of talks about the meaning of representation, and there's a lot of history to it. So that may be a good addition to your repertoire of documentaries, especially coming off the heels of Black History Month and now headed into Women's History Month. It's a part of both. So there's no time like the present. There are also other Barbies with diverse disabilities and life experiences. Again, I know they're dolls, but disability can be nodded to or represented physically in a doll, which I think is super cool. So I'll just list off a couple. There is a blind Barbie. She was created with the American Foundation for the Blind. And so she is created with accessories and physical differences to depict blindness. There are multiple Barbies who use wheelchairs or prosthetics, and a lot of them were created in collaboration with disability activists and a children's hospital. And many of these dolls have been like donated to children's hospitals, so children with disabilities can have access to dolls that represent them. There's a Barbie with type 1 diabetes. There's a Barbie with a cast on her arm. There are Barbies with albinism and vitiligo. There are 2 Barbies now with Down syndrome, and they were created with the National Down Syndrome Society, and they are different. One of them is white, and she has AFOs, which are like foot brace things. And then, clearly I'm not educated about this subject, so I encourage you to research it further. And then the other one is a woman of color, and she has glasses. The need for braces or like feet braces or glasses can come with some individuals with Down syndrome. So I think it was cool that they were both distinct in their depictions of Down syndrome and also what a woman with Down syndrome could look like. And these dolls were generally well received. So I think that's beautiful. It moves me to tears seeing videos of kids dressed up as the Barbie that looks like them. I saw this video of a young girl with Down syndrome, and she had her hair done like the first Barbie fashionista with Down syndrome, and she had a replica of the dress, and she was running around with her doll, and I thought it was so cute. That's girlhood right there, and I think that's beautiful. However, I'm going to gripe a little bit about the Barbie movie. Came out in 2023. I wish it had done a better job with disability representation. Yes, I'm aware there was a Barbie that uses a wheelchair depicted. However, no disabled Barbie was given a single speaking line. Which I'm like, okay, so you want to appear to be representing disability, but you don't want to give them lines or names or, I mean, I guess their name is Barbie. I guess that's a moot point with Barbie. But I would like to see more disabled characters being actual characters instead of props for like points for inclusivity. So I would prefer if that character had a line, but that's just me. So in the future, Mattel has opportunities to expand this disability representation. Barbie is not the only Mattel brand. So I would love to see more Barbies with disabilities, and then I would love to also see like American Girl dolls, Monster High dolls, Polly Pockets. Like, I would like to see that representation extend. I am aware that there is a cost to producing dolls with disabilities. Sometimes there is a need to modify their clothing or their like the mold used to make their body or their face. For example, with depicting Down syndrome, there are certain facial differences, particularly with eyes, about how they're set and the way the folds of their eyelids work and things like that. That can be done in a doll, but sometimes it takes some thoughtful effort. This doll, the Barbie with autism, has some of those changes made, like her eye paint. So it can be done. And like body molds, you may have to, like for the doll that uses a prosthetic, they had to create a mold for her leg to depict an amputation or potentially a limb difference. I don't know that it's specified. So I do know that that is a factor, and there's also new clothing that has to be created. However, that's the whole point of the fashionista line. Like, the whole point is, like, so many combinations of outfits and looks and hair types and hair colors. There's Barbies with blue hair, so certainly you can have Barbies with curly hair. Like, there's so many different ways they modify the dolls. So I know it would take effort, but I don't think that's impossible. And I think that that would expand the audience and could represent the broader disability community. I think that's wonderful for the community as a whole. So I did think of some opportunities for expansion. So I'm going to bring up a couple of those. Dwarfism is one. Now, I am aware that the Barbie fashionistas have, like, there's body types. There's, like, tall, original, petite, and curvy. The autism Barbie is an original. I have dolls of all the body types, and they are different, and their clothes do fit a little different. And I think at some points their shoes fit a little different. So it's already something they've done. And I know dwarfism has some significant physical differences, like achondroplasia, for example, often is, like, the phenotype is, like, shorter legs and a different skull structure, I believe. I need to educate myself more on it, but I think that's something Mattel could also do. And I have not heard of dolls with dwarfism. So I think about how many children are seeing every doll be of a certain height or certain ability or certain hair type or whatever it might be, and so they feel othered. And I don't think it is impossible to do in a Barbie of this price point. I don't think they're expensive to produce. I think it's worth a shot. I would love to see feeding tubes. I think it could work similarly to the way they do hearing aids and earrings, where they kind of like pierce the plastic of the doll's face. You can do that with nose piercings too, lip piercings. I think there's a way to create like an NG tube or even a G tube to have like a button. The type 1 diabetes doll has, I want to say like a CGM or something of that nature, like a glucose monitor. And so I think that innovation of how to do that. There are different disabilities and chronic illnesses that have something that's like more on the trunk, like a glucose monitor, a Dexcom, a feeding tube, like a G-tube button, or any number of things. A port, yeah, all kinds of things. So I'd love to see more of that. I'd also like to see forearm crutches. Some people use those as mobility aids for a variety of reasons. So I think forearm crutches is a cool way to do it. Some people call them European crutches, and apparently they're way more comfortable. So shout out if you're on your own personal crutches journey and your armpits hurt. Apparently forearm crutches may be an option for you. And I would also like to see more autistic people. There are different ways to represent autism. They could do all kinds of things. They could do, earbuds instead of headphones, or puffy coats, or graphic tees, or any number of ways. Like, there's so many different ways they represent neurotypical people. I don't think it's a horrible idea to include more autism-related accessories, like stress balls or whatever. I would love a like Barbie with a Nido Nice Cube. So, future collaboration idea. I don't expect a cut of the money if you do that. However, I would love if you would send me a doll. Anyway, there's so many ways to do it. And then also, it doesn't just have to be Barbie. I would love to see more disabled Ken dolls, and Skipper, and Stacy, and Chelsea. I would love an autistic Chelsea. I think that's cool. I would love an autistic Skipper, and obviously Stacy and Ken too, but I just think it's cool because they're all different. They represent different ages, and with women being diagnosed more frequently than girls, I think it would be cool for there to be an autistic girl doll like Chelsea instead of a woman, to kind of reflect that female autistic children do exist, even though they're less likely to be diagnosed at that age. So anyway, it's a lot of different age ranges and gender expressions that could be represented, and it enables more kinds of play. And that's kind of the point of Barbie, so I don't think it's a stretch. I think the representation is beneficial to disabled children, but also I've seen lots of conversation about siblings and children and other family members of disabled people enjoying this doll. For example, somebody whose sibling is autistic may have the doll, and it is a way of representing their family structure in their play, or for their sibling to play with them and feel represented as they play. So it can be beneficial in normalizing their autistic family member to them and to others. So I think that's super cool. So I wanted to ask the question, can or should you buy these toys if you are not disabled? I'm going to say yes. Now, if for some reason you're at the store and there is one autistic Barbie left in the whole store, and you are wanting to buy it, and there's also an autistic child who wants to buy it, I would personally defer to the autistic child. I think it is more intended for them to feel represented. However, that does not mean you can't come back and get one a different time. But that's the only situation where I feel like you have to be like, no, I can't. I'm not autistic. It's for everyone. And even if you have no autistic family member or friend, which, by the way, look for one. They are out there and they make great friends. Your child may benefit from having disability normalized to them, because you never know. You never know. So I think it's great because we vote with our dollar. So if you like seeing disabled Barbies, you buy them. If you're a doll collector and you avoid them for some reason, you're sending a message that they are less valuable to the brand. And unfortunately, we have to communicate with capitalism. But, I mean, buying an autistic Barbie is good for showing the company, like, hey, we like this. So if you're interested in this topic more, while I was writing this, Meg from the channel I'm Autistic Now What released a video about this Barbie. So I watched that. I linked it in the article. I think it's a great video. I think it covers the topic really well. So that came out kind of concurrently. So I watched it right before I edited the article, and I think it's really great. So I encourage you to watch that. You can also get involved with the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network as a way to kind of support autistic people and their potential needs they may have. I also want to promote 2 more articles. I have previously written about representation in dolls in my article about American Girl dolls. I have linked that in the article. And I've also previously written about autism, and I've linked that article in the web version. So now it's tangent time. So if you are not interested in hearing my tangent, I'm sorry, you can skip to the end. So, okay, tangent time. There are other dolls that represent disability, and I just wanted to highlight them for a second. So American Girl dolls, the Girl of the Year 2020, her name is Joss Kendrick. She has a hearing aid for congenital hearing loss. And it's interesting. I saw a lot of memes when they announced that there was going to be a doll with hearing loss, like a confirmed character. There are additions you can add on. You can add a hearing aid to just about any doll. But this one is like a confirmed character. So people were making jokes. They were like, there's the first the first American Girl doll with hearing loss. Wait, you mean the other ones can hear us? So to a lot of people, they're like, no doll can hear. This is a bit silly. But it's actually, I think, really special. They developed a new face mold for her so that the hearing aid could be like clip-on instead of like punched into her ear. I don't mean to get graphic, but like they use like a drill to pierce the ears so they can either do an earring like on the earlobe, or they can put a hole like right behind the ear at like the base of the skull so the hearing aid can like be inserted. But this one like clips into the ear. They molded the ear differently so it like clips in. So there's not like a gaping wound if she chooses not to wear her hearing aid. So that is one of the, I think that's potentially the only doll with a physical disability, like only character. So I also wanted to mention Molly McIntyre. She's from 1944. She wears glasses. We don't know the nature of her vision, so that potentially counts as a physical representation of disability. There's also Mary Ellen Larkin. She's from 1954, and in her story, she had polio as a child, and so as a result of that illness, she has weaker lungs that are like more sensitive to cold, and then has one leg that is weaker. However, that is not represented physically at all. The leg is not shorter or built to show atrophy or anything like that. It's just something you learn through the books and nowhere else. So I don't 100% feel like that counts, but I didn't want to leave her out. There's also several dolls with confirmed hidden disabilities. So that may be a disability that doesn't present physically or is less obvious when it presents. For example, Kavi Sharma is the 2023 Girl of the Year, and she has ADHD. And then Gabriella McBride, who is the 2017 Girl of the Year, has a stutter. Those are both talked about in their books. Like, for example, Gabriella is a poet and a dancer, and so the stutter is something she wants to work through to be able to do poetry the way she wants to. But that's not represented physically at all. I don't know how you could do that just because of the way American Girl dolls are made. I think that representation is important. However, it does not kind of represent itself as overtly as like Joss, for example. However, they have additional accessories you can buy, like a service dog vest for the American Girl pets. There's a diabetes care kit. There's plenty of mobility aids. There's wheelchairs, armpit crutches. I'm sure there's a better word than armpit crutches. So shout out to people who have those. And then there's also forearm crutches, all kinds of things. There's different casts and care kits and things like that. Then obviously you can add glasses or hearing aids as you see fit, which is really cool. So that's just kind of an idea of how American Girl represents disability. Now, on top of that, I also want to talk about another Mattel group, Monster High. This is kind of weird for me to investigate. I was not a Monster High girly. I'm very aware of Monster High, but I don't have any of the dolls myself. They're kind of like, so they're supposed to be like either monsters themselves or like the children of monsters, which gets a little complicated with disability. Because like, you think about like Hunchback of Notre Dame, there's like Quasimodo is depicted as like a monster and a freak to the people, but really he has a physical disability, and they turn that into kind of this like, oh, he's a monster, and that's a plot point in there. So I think it gets a little more complicated with characters being depicted as monsters and giving them disabilities, but at the same time, people wouldn't make that assumption with neurotypical dolls or traditionally abled dolls. They wouldn't be like, oh, they're saying that all of these people are monsters or whatever. So I think the representation works. It just is a little bit different. So I'll start with Frankie Stein. I know it's really hard to like guess what she's meant to be. She's the daughter of Frankenstein. I don't know if that would have been something I noticed at first. Yeah, Frankie Stein has a prosthetic leg. Now, I don't want to tangent too hard about Monster High, but there are different generations. So there's like G1, which is like the original Monster High dolls, and then there's G2, which is like a reboot, and they have different, some of the characters aren't included in G2, and there's different shows and movies and stuff. And then there's G3. So a lot of these disabilities were exclusive to like I think Frankie does not have a prosthetic leg except for G3. And I don't know if it's removable or not, but I believe it was painted on in prior generations because she's meant to be like a Frankenstein type where she's like made of a bunch of different bodies. So she already had like stitch lines and bolts and stuff, but this is like a confirmed prosthetic leg. There's also a character named Finnegan Wake, who's a merman who uses a wheelchair. However, this is really interesting to me because he has a tail. So he uses a wheelchair as a mobility aid because he doesn't have legs. He has a tail. I would love a character that uses a wheelchair due to like a disability like paralysis, spinal cord injury, spina bifida, cerebral palsy, any number of things. I think it's interesting that the only character that uses a wheelchair doesn't need mobility aids in the water. Like it's more of a circumstantial thing that's avoidable rather than an aid that is helpful all around. So I have mixed feelings on that. I do not use a wheelchair, so I'm not the community to speak on that. But it's also a man, so there's no female wheelchair users. I know that sounds like I don't want to sound like I'm just being like every single identity needs represented fully, but I don't feel like that's a big ask. You have a wheelchair designed for Monster High. Like the technology exists. The dolls already have knees, a lot of them do. Nothing really needs to change to make that happen. You just need to package them together. There's also some hidden disabilities, like Twyla Boogeyman, who's the daughter of the Boogeyman, is autistic. I don't know a ton about Twyla specifically. Twyla's only in like G1 and G3, but I think that could present an interesting storyline of like the Boogeyman being misunderstood and that people are quick to be scared of Twyla because she's different rather than like understanding of her. So I don't know. There's also Meowlady, who is a werecat who has ADHD. She has a twin sister named Persephone, so I think that's also kind of cool to have twins depicted differently, like one with ADHD and one without, which is kind of cool. They have TV characters that were not produced as dolls that have like Down syndrome, hearing aids, mobility cane, for example. but they were not created in dolls. So I didn't really count them in this list because I feel like that's different. So yeah, I think that line could use some more disability representation, but it is complicated. And then finally, oh my goodness, I've been trying to keep this episode under an hour, but you're about to hear me talk about Lego Friends. Okay, Lego Friends are like a little bit different from standard Legos. They're more like mini dolls instead of mini figures. And there's like the original run that has 5 girls. It's got, this is a fun test. Mia, Stephanie, Emma, Olivia, and Andrea. And then there's like side characters, but most things are based around those 5. So it'd be things like Emma's house, Stephanie's bake shop, Stephanie's soccer practice, Olivia's treehouse, or whatever. So they're mostly based around those characters. They have released like a new reboot in the last few years with expanded characters. One that stands out to me is Autumn. Autumn is Mia's daughter, so she's kind of like next generation, which is kind of cool. And she has a limb difference, so she has I don't think it's specified. No, I believe it is. It's not an amputation. She was born with a limb difference, and so it's her arm, and so she doesn't have like a hand on that arm. Which is interesting because a lot of Lego stuff is like part of the function is clicking things into their hands for them to hold. So depicting a Lego friend with a limb difference, I think, is super cool because that would affect the way you play and could be a very educational tool for children to like not show up and be like, what happened to your arm? Like they will be aware of this and how it could potentially affect them. The Barbies depicted with prosthetics, I believe they all have prosthetics. Autumn has, I think, one set where she has a prosthetic hand, because a lot of people with limb differences don't want to use a prosthetic, and so I think it's cool to depict someone who doesn't. There's also Sarah. She has a stoma and a scar and an ostomy bag. So that's like, it's so hard to do not in video form. But the scar like runs vertically across her stomach. It's visible when she's wearing like a swimsuit or a crop top, for example. And then an ostomy bag goes on a stoma. A stoma is like a hole that's like an access port. They can be used for like feeding tubes, like access directly to the stomach to provide nutrients to the digestive system without bypassing the mouth. An ostomy bag, I think, takes stuff out instead of putting stuff in. So it assists with the digestive tract and all that stuff. So I think that's super cool. Hannah has a continuous glucose monitor on her arm and a glucose monitor app on her phone. She's in the gym set, and her, you can see the CGM on her arm, and then the phone she's holding, you can see has her, like, glucose monitor. Like, her blood sugar is graphed on there, which is super cool. There's Luna, who's a wheelchair user. There's a character called Fiona, and she has Down syndrome, and she also is a business owner, which is really cool. There's a character named Jordan, who is vitiligo. And then there are also some hidden disabilities, like characters. It's easier to depict in something like TV or movies, like hidden disabilities are. So ADHD, different forms of anxiety. And then there's also a character depicted with a sunflower lanyard. So some people choose to identify their disability to others through something symbolic. Like, for example, some people have like rainbow puzzle pieces on things that can show support for autism or that they have autism themselves. Some people carry teal pumpkins at Halloween, or parents have their children carry teal pumpkins at Halloween to show to potential houses they visit that the child is autistic and may communicate differently, for example, because some houses they go, I'm not giving you candy until I hear you say trick or treat. And that excludes nonverbal children or children who, for any reason, don't want to do that. A sunflower lanyard is another way people disclose disabilities. I believe this character is in the airport. Places like airports or schools or, different public areas may be a place someone chooses to disclose a disability through some physical medium, like a lanyard, just so people can understand. There is controversy around those things because some people may interpret that as vulnerability and then target the person. So I encourage you to research that more. And, people with autism can say, I want to wear this, and that is totally fine. There's a difference rather than like forcing everyone with autism to outwardly identify themselves that way. So that's just kind of what I could find online from those 3 lines, and I just thought it was interesting to see that Lego had a character with a limb difference displayed in a different way than like Monster High or Barbie or American Girl. I believe American Girl has in the past made an amputee doll, but they made it like custom for an individual child to directly match them. I would love to see something like that be available more commercially so that people don't have to like have a Kickstarter or something like that to receive access to these things. So I'll wrap it up with a few items of like a call to action. I would really encourage you to buy disabled toys for your children. It can be really good for them. I think it would be better for a child to be exposed to those things in a, I say exposed to those things like it's some horrid thing. Disability is normal. Disability is common. It's good for your kids, though, to be like, oh, I have an autistic Barbie, so now I'm not freaking out about my aunt who's autistic or my sister or something like that. Like if you find out that like a baby you are carrying has Down syndrome, I think it could be productive to have a Barbie with Down syndrome or like watch a show about somebody with Down syndrome with, your older children, for example, to expose them to that so it is not a new thing for them and they can be supportive of the child's journey instead of just constantly, freaking out about it. So I think that would be really good. Like I said, these are not specifically only for people with the specific disabilities, and it's wonderful for them, and I think it is great, and it is mainly intended to represent them, but that representation benefits everyone. I think it is important to have diverse dolls for children in general. Like, if your child is white, they do not need to have exclusively white dolls. If your child is brown, they do not need to have exclusively brown dolls. Like, there have been people forever that have not had access, like people of color who have not had access to dolls that look like them. So they've played with white dolls, and they didn't, like, turn out insane. Like, it's possible to play with a doll that doesn't look like you. And so I think that presents a really great opportunity for kids to learn and build a more multicultural and multiracial understanding of the world. And, just there's so many things to learn about. So I think that's super cool. Yeah, I don't know. I think that'd be really good for kids. And then, of course, like, comment, share, subscribe, follow, do all of that. Rate this show if you're on a podcast platform. I really appreciate the support. I want to acknowledge that there's just a lot of like really junky stuff going on in the world right now. I'm not a fan, so I chose to focus on something that makes me more excited rather than feeling hopeless, because there are good things happening in the world. And obviously it doesn't change the fact that there are bad things happening in the world, but it makes it a little bit more bearable and worth fighting for when you're like, we're fighting for all these children to have representation and happy lives. We're fighting for everyone to feel accepted and belonging. And we're fighting for people to get over their bigotry and be more accepting of disabled people, people of color, immigrants, any community really, so that they do not face violence. So stay safe out there, make good decisions, treat each other with kindness, and send me free products, Mattel. If you're curious, Mattel, what I would like, I have been a fan of American Girl since like 2007. And so I am happy to talk about American Girl more, and I'm easy to bribe. You could send me literally a pair of American Girl shoes for one of my dolls, and I'd be like, you know what? This is the best company ever. So it'd be harder to bribe me if you're like Amazon or an AI company. But Mattel, you have a special place in my heart, so you could probably do it. So I encourage you to. Anyway, if you're not Mattel, thank you for listening to that message anyway. Have a good rest of your day, and I'll see you next time. Bye.